Let's talk about Proverbs 3:5 for a minute. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. We're only focusing on this part. I know normally they go into the next verse. We're only focusing on this part for a reason. And that's because as humans, if we don't understand something, we cause ourselves a lot of pain trying to understand when we don't trust God. One of the reasons why people struggle with anxiety so much is because they are fearful of the unknown. They want to understand the future. They want to understand the consequences of something or the outcome of something before we get to the time of the outcome. So in every person, whether they're Christian or not, if they don't understand something, they will obviously go into their own mind and try to work out a reason or an understanding of it in their own process. And once again, that can cause anxiety because there could be possibly so many outcomes, and it causes a form of anxiety, or it can cause anger depending on the situation. But ultimately, it can cause you to assume the wrong thing of what's going on. But as Christians, we're supposed to trust in the Lord on these things and ask Him for wisdom on it, and then just trust and wait upon Him for Him to give us the answer. When David talks a lot about waiting upon the Lord, because you know what, we're not always going to get our answer right away. We're not always going to get our knowledge right away. Sometimes we have to wait. And then sometimes He'll give it to us without us even having to ask, because He knows that we need it for a particular situation. But even as Christians, we can ask God for wisdom, and then we expect Him to answer right away. If He doesn't answer right away, some people will get into their own heads and start thinking through of the possibilities, and then they end up leaning on their own knowledge. Now, you hear three voices in your head. It's God, yourself, because you do have your own thoughts, or the enemy. And if you're sitting there thinking through possibilities, but you're not truly relying and waiting on God, then you're starting to lean on your own understanding. And it's not bad to think things through, but we have to be careful, because sometimes we can work it up in a way where we think God is telling us just because simply we felt it or we heard. And it wasn't God to begin with. It was your own voice and your own mind recalling things from, say, the past, or thinking through something you've already learned about. So like if you were to go to fix a fence, right, and you're not quite sure in the moment how to fix it, of course you're going to start thinking of possibilities on how to fix it. And if you have gained any knowledge on fixing that fence, what is going to come first? Like if you happen to have watched a video 2 years ago on how to fix a fence, and that knowledge is going to come back. Now, this happened to me with my wash machine. I had a tube break, and the type of wash machine that it is, no one will fix it. And it had a huge hole in it, so it was constantly leaking a ton of water. The first time I fixed it, I didn't really ask God how to fix it. I just went and I grabbed the tape, like waterproof tape, I guess, that I knew of, the knowledge that I knew of on how to fix it, and I tried using that. It absolutely failed. Well, the second time that I tried to fix it, I put a little more effort into relying on God, and it's fixed. Because He walked me to where I needed to go in the store. He walked me to know what to grab. And I didn't fully understand what was going on at first, and then He pieced it together for me. But at that point, I wasn't even thinking about it. I was just kind of listening to Him, right? But I wasn't going through my own head on how it would work. So I'm sure He could have told me sooner how to fix it if I had been a little bit more willing to ask for wisdom and wait on Him. But the first time I did it, instead, I had just tried doing it with whatever knowledge I had. But a lot of people, that knowledge comes back to them from something that they had learned prior, and they go, oh, God told me to do it this way. And either it doesn't work, and maybe it does, because the way they learned was the proper way to do it. But it wasn't necessarily God telling you. And a lot of people will get caught up in that. And now what happens is they start believing that it was God, and God's not able to show them the real reason why, because if God shows them the real reason why, they just reject it automatically. They don't recognize that maybe God's trying to change their thought process. And I notice this a lot with people who have a hard time understanding spiritual matters. And they still think of the spiritual aspects in a carnal way. So if someone hears the spiritual side to something, either through a sermon or through a friend talking to them, and they don't immediately understand it, some may wait on God, and some may just listen to it and then wait on God to give them understanding. But there's a lot of people who automatically reject it. And it's because they don't understand it. People go based off of their experiences and what they've learned. So if they're going based off an experience of something else, they'll go, oh, well, I understand it in this way, so this is what it must be. And they completely reject what God was doing in their friend initially who told them. So a lot of people are rejecting spiritual aspects of everything that God wants them to know just simply for a lack of understanding, and they start trying to think it through in their own head rather than relying on God to give them that revelation of understanding. You're not going to understand everything that happens, nor do we need to. As humans, we feel like we need to have this control of knowing and understanding everything or preparing for it. And I am fully guilty of that. I try to over-prepare for stuff ahead of time in order to make it easier when the main task comes upon us. But sometimes it fails because I jumped in too soon, right? That's our human nature. We tend to do that. When it comes to spiritual matters, we need to learn to slow down and wait on God to give us understanding. Maybe one day, if you don't understand something and you did reject it, maybe you'll go through an experience where it shows you what the other person meant. Maybe it was just something you didn't understand because you had never experienced it for yourself. We have to remain teachable in all manners, which in waiting upon the Lord to give you understanding is remaining teachable. Because if you choose to go off in your own understanding, you're not allowing Him to teach you, or you're not allowing Him to use someone else to teach you. And if we don't remain teachable, it's going to hurt us, not only spiritually, but in the real world. There's a lot of people who are going to give you good advice because simply they have already tried it, and they see all the cons that come with it, and that the cons outweigh the pros of the situation. And they see how it can turn disastrous. Well, that's the same way it is with your faith. You have to remain teachable in order to let God grow your faith, but also to keep you from going down a wrong path or allowing anger to build up in your heart or allowing anxiety or anything else. You have to allow Him to teach you, whether it's by His own voice or by another person. So in all situations, remain teachable. Know that in every situation, you don't know all there is to learn. You have further to learn. And let go and let God. Like, really, let go and let God.